actually talking about solving quadratic equations. Last chapter we were dealing with graphing, and now we're actually going to be solving them. Okay? So there's a lot of different ways to solve. The first way we're going to solve is we're going to solve by factoring, or not by factoring, by graphing. So when you find solutions, one thing you have to know is that solutions for quadratic equations are called three different things. They're called roots, zeros, and solutions. They all pretty much mean the same thing. Okay? Okay. You can find them by finding where they intersect the x-axis on a graph. Quadratic equations can have one, two, or no solutions when you look at the graph. Now, eventually what you're going to see is that no solutions is actually too imaginary, but we're not going to get into imaginary right now. We're just going to say that there's no solutions, no real solutions. Okay? So a one real solution looks like this. It comes down and it touches the graph in one spot. It only touches the x-axis in one spot. Two real solutions touches the graph in two spots, so it passes through it. Doesn't matter the direction. All that matters here is how many times it touches the x-axis or intercepts the x-axis. And then for zero real solutions, it doesn't cross the x-axis. It turns away from it. So it turns away. Okay. So when we're graphing, we can actually just plug them in and see that, oh, it touches the x-axis here, or it doesn't touch the x-axis, so it's no solution. So let's go to our lesson. Let's do some problems. We're going to start with some basic problems where y equals x squared minus 7x plus 10. Now, we're just using our graphing calculator to find the answers. We're going to learn how to do it by hand later. So I go to my y equals, clear out anything I have, and I type x squared minus 7x plus 10. And I'm going to graph it, and I look to see where it crosses the x-axis, and there it is. It crosses at 2, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So my two real solutions are at x equals 2 and x equals 5. Now, not all of our problems are going to look that good. Sometimes what they're going to do is they're not going to say y equals, they're going to say 0 equals. So here's an example of this. 0 equals x squared minus x minus 12. It's the same idea. Instead of a 0, I just think that that's y. Because what I'm doing is I'm finding out when those things are 0. And so that's why I'm able to plug y in there. So I go back to my graph, and I'm going to plug it in, clear this out, x squared minus x minus 12, go to graph, and this one crosses at negative 3 and positive 4. So the two real solutions are at negative 3 and positive 4. Okay? Well, still, these have been basic because we haven't had to do anything yet. Let's go to some that are a little harder. So this one, I have 4x squared equals negative 4x, or equals 4x plus 30. Well, the issue with number 3 compared to 1 and 2 is that 1 and 2, everything was together on the same side. For number 3, I have things on opposite sides. So you could do two things. They both will work out. I can either move these two over here, and it becomes 4x squared minus 4x minus 30 equals 0. Or I could have moved the 4x squared over, and had 0 equals negative 4x squared plus 4x plus 30. Both of these things are going to give me the same answer when I graph them. So 4x squared, oops, let's clear this out. 4x squared minus 4x minus 30. And then if you notice, I'm going to do the same one right on top of it, because then that way we can see they're the exact same thing. So there's one, and there's another. Now, another thing that makes this difficult is that they don't cross exactly. Now, you should notice that they have a different slope. One goes up, one goes down, but that's okay because they have the same intercept. Okay? So we can guesstimate what that is, or we can use a process to actually find out what it is. So I'm going to delete this second one, and I'm going to graph this one and look at it. So it looks like it's negative 2.2 maybe and positive 3.3 or something. So what I'm going to do is I hit this trace button, but I'm going to hit second trace. I'm going to calculate the 0. Now this is a little confusing, but this is what you do. I move my cursor to the left-hand 0. So when I see my flashing cursor right near the axis, I'm going to stop. That's about as close as I can get. Now it's asking me to go to the left. You see this? It says go to the left. So I'm going to go to the left 2, and I'm going to hit enter. Then I'm going to go back to my axis, and I'm going to go to the right 2, and I hit enter. And yes, I want the calculator to give me a guess. And so it's negative 2.28. So that is my first real answer. X is negative 2.28. Now I need to go to the other side. So again, I hit second trace. I'm doing my zeros. And I'm going to go over to my other 0 where it crosses the x-axis. And it's getting there. There it is. So that's about as close as I can get, and it tells me to go to the left. So I go to the left 1, 2, hit enter, and then I go back, and I go to the right 1, 2, and hit enter. Now I'm going to guess, and the answer is 3.28. So this is a little bit harder of a process, but it'll still let you find the answer. On a problem like this, I would probably not actually get my answer by graphing. I would solve it algebraically, which we'll learn how to do later in the chapter. Okay? All right, let's do one more. So I get 1/2 x squared minus x equals 4. Okay? So why don't you go ahead, you can't read that. Why don't you go ahead and pause this, try this out, and see if you can figure out what you're going to do to plug it into the calculator. Okay, so you should have gotten one of these two. It doesn't matter which one, they will both work. So let's plug these in. So 1 divided by 2, x squared minus x minus 4, and let's see what it looks like. And this one crosses good. It crosses at negative 2 and positive 4. So x equals negative 2 and positive 4. So when you're graphing, you're solving by graphing, the first thing you need to do is you need to find out where it crosses the x-axis. And sometimes you're going to have to move things around so it's a 0 or y equals. Okay, now to the next type of problem. The next type of problem is solving by taking a square root. Okay? When a quadratic equation only has an x squared and not a regular x, you can solve it by taking the square root. Eventually we'll learn how to use something called completing the square, but right now we're just wanting equations that look like this. 5x squared equals something. We do not want anything like this where it has both of those. Those we will not do right now with taking the square root. Okay, so when we solve a problem like this, we treat it just like any other equation. So I'm going to redo this one. 5x squared minus 10x minus 10 equals 35. Well, I treat it like an equation. I'm going to solve. To get rid of a minus 10, I add 10. And I get 5x squared is 45. To get rid of a times 5, I divide by 5. So I get x squared is 9. And this is the place where it might be new. To get rid of a square, you take a square root. And the square root of 9 is 3. But for solving, it's plus or minus 3. Because a positive 3 times a positive 3 is 9. And a negative 3 times a negative 3 is 9. So you can get two possible answers, so that's why it's a plus or minus. Alright, let's go back and do a couple more, and then we will be done. So let's solve using square root. Okay, so we're on number 5. So let's do one a little different. X squared over 4 plus 1 is 10. So you're going to subtract 1 on both sides, and you get x squared over 4 is 9. Times by 4 on both sides, and you get 36. And so you take the square root, and you get plus or minus 6. So that one's the same idea, it just looks a little different. Okay. Now, sometimes you're going to have parentheses. And so the parentheses are going to be changing it up some. So I'm going to say this. Now, with parentheses, you have to take care of the outside first. The only thing on the outside is the square. So I'm actually going to take the square root first, which is different than what I did on this one on the left. So I have x minus 2 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 7. This squared and square root kind of cross off, so that's why I'm just left with the x minus 2. To get rid of a plus 2, I add 2, and this is the place that it looks funny, but it works. I cannot combine these because this is a whole number and this is a radical. So I just write 2 plus or minus the square root of 7. Alright, let's do one more, and this one's going to actually work out where we get a number. So, let's see if I can make one up. X minus 3 squared plus 5 equals 13. Alright, so I'm going to draw my line down so I remember I got a minus 5 first. So it's 2x minus 3 squared equals 8. Divide by 2 on both sides, and I get x minus 3 squared equals 4. I'm going to take the square root on both sides, and I get x minus 3 equals plus or minus 2, because I know what the square root of 4 is. So now this is where it gets a little confusing. I know that I have to add 3, but really I have two problems. I have 3 plus 2, and I have 3 minus 2. That's what that plus or minus means, is that you have to do both. And so this first answer is 5, and this second answer is 1. So you have to remember when you're solving by square root, you get rid of everything on the outside. Then you take care of the square root, and sometimes there's things left on the inside and sometimes there's not.